NFL players are already reacting after Jalen Carter landed a historic $152 million extension, making him the highest-paid defensive tackle in league history. From teammates to rivals and Eagles legends, the reactions came pouring in, and not everyone saw the deal the same way. Let me catch you up. Tuesday morning, training camp horns hadn't even sounded yet, and Adam Schefter's phone was already buzzing. The Eagles and Jalen Carter had a deal. 4 years, $152 million, up to $160 million if the incentives hit, and $106 million of it guaranteed the moment he signs. Jalen Carter just became the highest paid defensive tackle in NFL history. A 4-year deal, $152 million, with $106 million guaranteed, landed on his desk right as training camp opened. Phones across the league lit up within minutes. Teammates, rivals, and analysts all had something to say about it. Some called it a no-brainer. Others saw it as a warning shot fired straight at Tampa Bay. And one Eagles legend needed only 6 words to sum up the moment. So what exactly did the rest of the NFL make of Jalen Carter suddenly out-earning every defensive tackle who ever played the game? Tuesday morning, training camp horns hadn't even sounded yet, and Adam Schefter's phone was already buzzing. The Eagles and Jalen Carter had a deal. 4 years, $152 million, up to $160 million if the incentives hit, and $106 million of it guaranteed the moment he signs. That's not just a big number. The contract is the richest for a defensive tackle in NFL history in both guaranteed money and average annual value at $38 million. Let that sink in for a second. Not richest among young players, not richest for a recent draft class, richest ever, full stop. Within the hour, the reactions started rolling in, and they came from everywhere. Darius Slay, who lined up next to Carter in Philly's defensive front for 2 seasons, didn't overthink his response. He fired off 3 words on X. "Yes, sir. Congrats to my dog." Short, direct, from someone who watched Carter up close before Slay himself got released in 2025. Then came the media reactions, and this is where things got interesting. Barstool's Stephen Chea didn't talk about Carter at all. He pivoted straight to Tampa. "This is bad news for the Bucs, Vita Vea," said Chea. Because at the exact same moment Carter was signing the richest deal of his life, an entirely different defensive tackle situation was blowing up 400 miles south, and the two stories were about to collide. Jake Rabati had a completely different read on it. No hesitation, no nuance, just absolute no-brainer. He'd been waiting for this news for weeks, tweeting earlier that he wondered if something would get done before camp even opened. Now it was, and he was relieved it was finally out of the way. Not everyone reacted with pure celebration, though. An account known as Nico, running under the handle Elite Takes, admitted he didn't see this coming as fast as it did. "Sheesh, I'm surprised Howie didn't play any hardball," speculated Nico. That's a jab at Eagles GM Howie Roseman, known across the league as one of the shrewdest negotiators in football. And even he apparently didn't drag this one out. Then there's the college football crowd weighing in too. Rusty Mansell, who covers the Georgia Bulldogs for Dogs HQ, zoomed out on the bigger picture. He pointed to the fact that Carter's now part of a growing list of Georgia products, cashing in at the NFL level. "This has to be the most money a group of teammates have ever made. Another former Georgia Bulldog with a massive contract," stated Mansell. Albert Breer, one of the most respected league insiders in the business, jumped in with historical context almost immediately. He noted that Carter's now just the 3rd player from the entire 2023 first round to land what he called a monster second contract, following Texans edge rusher Will Anderson Jr. and Lions linebacker Jack Campbell. He said Jalen Carter gets his payday, and he's just the 3rd 2023 first round to land a monster second deal, after Texans DE Will Anderson Jr. and Lions LB Jack Campbell. And then there's the reaction that arguably hit hardest, coming from inside the Eagles organization itself. An Eagles legend, someone who watched this whole thing unfold from the locker room, dropped a reaction that took only 6 words to land. It captured something the analytics and the press releases couldn't: what it actually feels like when a guy like Carter gets paid like this. Even ESPN got in on it live. Pat McAfee broke into his show within hours of the news to react to the signing on air, treating it as one of the day's headline stories, right alongside conversations about Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers. The segment aired as one of ESPN's top NFL clips of the day, sandwiched between talk of Myles Garrett and Travis Kelce, framing the entire offseason. So here's the setup. In the span of about 12 hours, a 24-year-old defensive tackle who fell to the 9th pick in his own draft class because teams were nervous about him went from a guy on a rookie deal to the single highest paid player at his position in the history of the league and the entire NFL, from teammates to rivals to insiders to a division rival bracing for fallout, reacted almost instantly. But to understand why this number is such a big deal, why insiders like Breer stopped what they were doing to comment, why an entire division suddenly has a problem on its hands, you have to go back. Because Jalen Carter wasn't always a guaranteed thing. In fact, 3 years ago, plenty of teams wanted nothing to do with him. Before the $152 million, before the Pro Bowls, before highest paid defensive tackle in NFL history became a phrase attached to his name, Jalen Carter was one of the most talked about and most avoided prospects in recent draft memory. A centerpiece of Georgia's dominant defense, Carter was widely considered one of the top prospects entering the 2023 draft, but off-field concerns gave some teams pause. That's the polite version. The real version is darker. He had been involved in a fatal crash in Athens, Georgia, following the Bulldogs championship parade, and he ultimately pleaded no contest to misdemeanor charges of reckless driving and racing, sentenced to 12 months of probation, a fine, and community service. The vehicle Carter was alleged to be racing against crashed, resulting in the death of Georgia teammate Devin Willock and recruiting staffer Chandler LaCroix. The crash happened hours after Georgia's celebration for their second straight national title. The accident occurred 6 days after Georgia won their second consecutive national college football championship, and hours after a parade celebrating that victory. Two people who just celebrated a championship never made it home. Investigators didn't take it lightly either. The Athens-Clarke County Police Department issued an arrest warrant alleging Carter was racing his 2021 Jeep Trackhawk against the 2021 Ford Expedition, driven by the recruiting staffer, which led to the wreck. Carter was still expected in Indianapolis for the scouting combine when the warrant dropped. Carter had been due in Indianapolis on Wednesday for the NFL scouting combine and was expected to address the arrest warrant when he returned to Athens. Instead, he turned himself in. Kirby Smart, his own head coach, didn't dodge the gravity of it. Georgia coach Kirby Smart expressed his concern about the charges in a statement, saying they were deeply concerning, especially given the loss the program was still processing. This wasn't a program trying to protect its star. It was a coach acknowledging how serious the situation actually was. Carter's own words at the time reflected someone who believed the story would resolve in his favor. On Twitter, Carter released a statement saying he expected to be fully exonerated. That's not exactly how it played out. He took a plea instead of fighting it in court. In an agreement reached with Athens-Clarke County prosecutors, Carter entered pleas of no contest to charges of racing and reckless driving. The sentence itself: probation, a fine just over $1,000, community service hours, and a license suspension. Athens-Clarke County Solicitor General Will Fleenor confirmed the sentence and said Carter's privilege to drive in Georgia had been suspended for 120 days. Fleenor even acknowledged publicly that people were going to question whether the charges matched the severity of what happened. Fleenor acknowledged questions about the severity of the charges and whether more serious offenses occurred, saying law enforcement evaluated the appropriateness of more serious charges. There was also a separate detail that made the whole thing look even messier. A speeding stop just months before the crash, where an officer straight up warned him. On September 22, Carter was stopped for speeding, and an officer is heard on body camera footage telling him that he was reckless, issuing 3 traffic tickets. One of those tickets was for going 89 in a 45. One ticket showed Carter was driving at 89 mph in a 45 mph zone. So when draft analysts talked about makeup and character concerns, this is what they meant. It wasn't abstract. Carter had become one of the most controversial prospects in that year's draft, due in large part to a no-contest plea to speeding and reckless driving charges, after a multi-car incident that resulted in 2 people dying. Add to that a pro day where he showed up out of shape. Carter appeared at Georgia's pro day 9 pounds heavier than he had been in February, and he could not complete drills because of poor conditioning. That's the kind of detail that sends front offices into war rooms arguing for hours. And they did argue. Teams that could have had a generational interior lineman decided the risk wasn't worth it. Carter fell to the number 9 overall pick in the 2023 draft due to off-field concerns, including questions about his work ethic. 9 picks. That's 9 teams that looked at arguably the best player in the entire draft and passed. Then Philadelphia stepped in. Not tentatively either. They traded up 1 spot to draft Carter 9th overall. Where other franchises saw risk, The Eagles saw upside they were willing to bet on. The Eagles believed they were uniquely equipped to help support and guide Carter with veteran leaders in the defensive line room, as well as the presence of some of his former Georgia teammates, including defensive tackle Jordan Davis. That bet paid off almost immediately. His rookie deal wasn't small to begin with. He signed a fully guaranteed 4-year, $21.8 million contract with a $13.2 million signing bonus. But nobody thought that number would look like pocket change 3 years later. By the time he'd played out even a fraction of that deal, it was obvious the doubts about his ability at least had been completely wrong. He has 13.5 sacks, 37 quarterback hits, and 108 tackles in his first 3 seasons. Not gaudy sack numbers necessarily, but the kind of interior disruption that reshapes how offenses game plan entirely. That disruption showed up biggest on the sport's biggest stage. Carter was instrumental in helping the Eagles win Super Bowl licks to cap the 2024 season. A guy who failed to pick 9 because teams were scared of him ended up being one of the central reasons Philadelphia hoisted a Lombardi trophy less than 2 years later. The accolades followed. Carter has been selected to each of the past 2 Pro Bowls. He wasn't just showing up to Pro Bowls as a courtesy nod either. He earned second-team All-Pro honors during the Eagles' Super Bowl season in 2024, when he led the team in pressures with 45, tackles for loss with 12, and quarterback hits with 16. Even opposing coordinators, the people paid to find weaknesses in him, ran out of things to say other than admiration. Former Commanders offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury put it about as bluntly as a coach can. He's one of the most dominant players in the league, if not the most dominant that I've seen, Kingsbury said late in the 2025 season. He can wreck a game by himself. That's the arc. A guy teams were scared to touch on draft night became. 3 seasons later, a guy offensive coordinators build entire game plans around just trying to survive. And it's exactly why the number attached to his new deal landed the way it did around the league. Because everybody who watched those 3 seasons knew this contract wasn't hype. It was overdue. But there's still one more piece of the puzzle nobody had fully accounted for. Carter wasn't the only defensive tackle looking for a massive payday this offseason. And when his deal got done first, it set off a chain reaction nobody saw coming, least of all the team 400 miles south of Philadelphia. To understand why Carter's deal detonated the way it did across the league, you need to understand the market he walked into. Because this wasn't the first time in 2026 that a defensive tackle reset the position's pay scale. It was actually the second time in a matter of weeks. Earlier in the offseason, the Titans extended Jeffrey Simmons on a deal that paid him over $35 million annually to reset the DT market. Before that, the previous top average annual value for a defensive tackle was Chris Jones at just under $32 million per season. So the position had already seen one seismic shift. Simmons' deal, specifically, was a 3-year contract worth $105.8 million, after leading all defensive tackles the previous season with 11.0 sacks, while picking up first-team All-Pro honors. That's a serious number. It made him the undisputed top earner at his position for about a month. Then Carter's camp and the Eagles got a deal done, and Simmons got leapfrogged almost instantly. The $38 million per year average makes Carter the highest paid interior defender in the NFL, leapfrogging Jeffrey Simmons' $35.276 million average signed last month. That's a brutal turn for Simmons. Barely a month at the top before someone else blows past him. But it also tells you exactly how fast this market was moving. Nobody expected the position to get reset twice in one offseason. And it wasn't just Carter and Simmons in the mix either. Philly had already signed Jordan Davis to a 3-year, $78 million extension earlier this offseason. 2 guys from the same defensive line room, both getting paid 9 figures within months of each other. CBS Sports ran the math on what that means for Philadelphia's books. The magician Howie Roseman found a way to extend both Carter and Davis and solidify the interior of Philly's defensive line for years to come. An expensive investment at $230 million. $230 million committed to the interior of one defensive line. That's not a normal offseason. That's a franchise deciding the trenches are the entire identity of the team. The Eagles are clearly prioritizing the trenches as they have for decades, and that philosophy runs straight through the front office. Roseman's approach has always been to build from the inside out, rather than splash cash on skill positions in free agency. Philadelphia has long believed in building its team from the inside out, from the line of scrimmage to the outside. And that approach extends to the team's roster-building philosophy. Draft well and reward your homegrown talent. rather than always paying a premium on the free agent market. But here's where it gets messy for everyone else in the league. Because right as Carter's number landed, a completely separate situation 400 miles south was already boiling over, and Carter's deal poured gasoline directly on it. Down in Tampa, Buccaneers defensive tackle Vita Vea had already requested a trade. Not hinted at it, requested it officially through his agent. Vita Vea, a two-time Pro Bowler, had requested a trade from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, following failed attempts to negotiate a long-term contract extension. The timing could not have been worse for the Bucs. Vea's trade request landed the same week Carter's deal did, and reporters immediately connected the two. While the timing is coincidental, it's not surprising that, within the same 24-hour period that Vea requested a trade, the Eagles spent nearly $40 million per season to secure Jalen Carter for the long term. Vea wasn't asking to go just anywhere either. He had specific teams in mind, all tied to home. Vea told NFL Network he wanted to play for the San Francisco 49ers, Los Angeles Rams, Los Angeles Chargers, or Las Vegas Raiders. A source told The Athletic's Ted Nguyen, since Vea grew up in Milpitas, California, about a 20-minute drive to Levi Stadium, home of the 49ers. The money gap driving all of this was stark. Vea, 31, was entering the final year of a $71 million contract extension he signed in January 2022, scheduled to make $17 million in base salary in 2026. Compare that to what Carter, 3 years younger and with a fraction of Vea's mileage, just secured, and you can see exactly why Vea's camp decided enough was enough. Barstool's Stephen Chaya had already flagged this dynamic the moment Carter's deal broke, and NFL.com's own analysis backed it up completely. Chaya pointed out that Carter and Vea were both seeking contracts this offseason, but the Eagles got their deal done, essentially eliminating the possibility of Vea going to Philadelphia as a potential replacement and putting pressure on the Buccaneers, as Vea now has additional leverage when negotiating a conclusion with Tampa Bay. After Carter set a brand new standard for the position, Sports Illustrated's breakdown of the situation didn't pull punches on what it meant for Tampa Bay's front office either. The Buccaneers weren't just dealing with one contract headache, they had two disgruntled stars on their hands at once. The timing of Vea's trade request was clearly a negotiating ploy, as the team attempted to grapple with the unhappiness of quarterback Baker Mayfield and Mayfield's own contract situation, with Mayfield saying he would play on his current deal and was barreling toward free agency in 2027. And this wasn't a franchise used to that kind of chaos. Tampa Bay isn't typically a franchise associated with perpetual underpayment or an inability to sign stars, but these two cases arrived at a precarious time. The Buccaneers morphed from fringe Super Bowl contender to out of the playoffs over the course of last season, with Mike Evans departing in free agency and Levante David retiring. The pressure wasn't just external chatter, either. Vea himself was navigating it publicly, expressing hope the sides could still find middle ground even after formally requesting out. Reports made clear the number he was chasing had shot up specifically because of what just happened in Philadelphia. Vita Vea's price tag continued to skyrocket after Jalen Carter reset the defensive tackle market with a historic Eagles contract extension. Even his current pay ranking in the league tells the story. The veteran defensive tackle is currently the 14th highest paid player at his position in terms of total cash and is looking for a well-deserved raise entering a contract year. 14th. For a two-time Pro Bowler who started for one of the league's best defenses for years. That gap was already uncomfortable before Carter's deal. Now it's a 5-alarm fire. NFL.com went as far as mapping out landing spots for V, treating the trade as close to inevitable, floating destinations that stretched from the Giants, who just dealt away Dexter Lawrence, to a potential reunion out west. The need is clear after Big Blue traded Dexter Lawrence, perhaps the only current nose tackle better than Vea this offseason. So in the span of about a week, the defensive tackle position went from a market that had already been reset once by Simmons to reset again by Carter, to now forcing a Pro Bowl veteran to publicly demand a trade because his own front office couldn't keep pace. One contract in Philadelphia set off tremors that reached Tampa within 24 hours. That's the ripple effect nobody outside the building expected when Schefter first hit send on that report. But inside the Eagles' walls, there was a much quieter, much more personal reaction happening. One that had nothing to do with market shifts or division rivals, and everything to do with what this deal meant for a guy who'd been doubted since before he ever put on an NFL uniform. Every number gets attached to reactions from outsiders, insiders, analysts, rival executives quietly recalculating their own cap sheets. But the reactions that hit differently are the ones from people who've actually shared a locker room with the guy. Slay's 3 words weren't just a congratulatory tweet from a random ex-teammate. He'd spent 2 full seasons lined up next to Carter, watching him develop from a raw, physically dominant rookie into the exact player who just broke the bank. Eagles legend Darius Slay congratulated Carter on X after NFL insider Adam Schefter announced the news. Slay had played with Carter in Philadelphia for 2 seasons before he was released in 2025. That's not a distant admirer. That's someone who blocked for him in walkthroughs, sat next to him in meeting rooms, and watched the growth up close before he was let go. And it's that growth, specifically, the gap between Carter's obvious talent and his day-to-day consistency, that's been the quiet subplot running underneath this entire contract story. Because even as the money got bigger, the conversation inside the building never fully left one subject. Is he doing the little things right? Every single play, every single day. That question came from Carter's own position coach, and he didn't dodge it. Just 11 days before the extension got announced, Eagles defensive line coach Clint Hurts sat down with reporters and was asked directly about where Carter still needs to grow. He didn't give the safe answer. He has to be consistent with doing the little things, Hurts said. We've all talked about the talent and overall potential that he has in the flash plays, but it's the consistency of doing the small things the right way all the time. That's a big piece for him. There's an edge. There's always a fine line. The edge and the tenacity that he plays with. Read that again. This is his own coach. Less than 2 weeks before a $152 million contract gets announced, publicly flagging that the same edge that makes Carter dominant is also the exact thing the team needs him to rein in and channel more consistently. That's not a knock. It's a coach being honest about what separates flash player from cornerstone of a defense for the next 6 years, which is exactly what this contract now demands he become. It's also worth noting Carter wasn't fully locked in during every stretch of this offseason leading up to the deal. Carter did not participate in team drills during the team's mandatory minicamp, and coach Nick Sirianni declined to say whether that was injury or contract related. That kind of ambiguity sitting there unresolved for weeks is exactly the sort of thing that can spiral into a full-blown camp holdout saga if it isn't handled. Instead, the front office moved before it ever got there. There was also a physical toll that hung over the negotiation the entire time. Carter wasn't just a guy demanding to get paid off reputation. He was coming off a genuinely rough stretch physically. Carter looked like a shell of himself at times towards the end of last season as he dealt with surgery on both of his shoulders. But this is a sensible extension, assuming that the shoulders aren't set to be a long-term problem. That's a real risk the Eagles chose to absorb. 2 shoulder surgeries, a visible dip in play late in the year, and they still handed him the richest guarantee in position history. That tells you how much value they place on what he looked like before the shoulders wore him down. He was clearly the best lineman on the defense in 2024, and the Eagles clearly expect that sort of play going forward. Carter's own voice in all of this has been consistent, at least in tone. When the team put out its official statement on the extension, they included a quote from him that says less about the money and more about how he sees himself on the field. I have the mindset. Carter says that nobody can outdo me. That's the same mentality that made him a problem for opposing offensive lines in the first place. The same one his coach was gently trying to point in a more disciplined direction just days earlier. Now that mentality has a $152 million contract attached to it, which either becomes the ultimate validation of his approach or the exact pressure point the coaching staff was worried about. And the Eagles front office wasn't shy about explaining why they were willing to gamble on both the shoulders and the edge. Having Carter as an anchor at 6'3" and 314 pounds, as one of the best interior pass rushers in the NFL per Pro Football Focus, and a run-stuffing force sets up the rest of the defense. Offenses, for sure, keep number 98 in focus when they game plan to play the Eagles. That's the real internal case for the deal. It's not just about rewarding 3 good seasons. It's about locking down the one player who forces opposing coordinators to build entire game plans around a single number on the depth chart, the same effect Kingsbury described from the other sideline. There's also a business logic that the team clearly weighed against the risk. Multiple reports noted the Eagles moved specifically to avoid the kind of prolonged uncertainty that other franchises looking south toward Tampa are dealing with right now. The team had previously exercised Carter's 5th-year option, keeping him under contract through 2027, but moved early, rather than allowing uncertainty to develop around his future. That's a direct contrast to what's unfolding with Villa. The Bucks let negotiations drag until a Pro Bowl veteran felt he had no option left. But to request a trade publicly, the Eagles, sitting on 2 additional years of contractual control over Carter, chose to act early instead of banking that leverage. Of course, Carter already had 2 years left under team control this season and next. With a 5th-year option, they didn't have to move now. They chose to. ESPN's Tim McManus, who's covered this team since 2010, framed the timing plainly. The deal landed right as camp opened, closing the door on any drama before it could start. The deal puts any potential drama regarding his contract to bed before training camp practices begin. So while the league outside was reacting to a number, the people actually inside the building were reacting to something a little more layered. A talented, sometimes inconsistent, physically banged up 24-year-old who just got handed the keys to the defense for the next 6 years, with his own coach on record saying the edge that makes him great is the same edge that needs sanding down. Which brings everything back to the moment this all started. The 6 words from an Eagles legend, the 3 words from Slay, the instant reactions from insiders across the league. All of it building toward one final question that hangs over the entire deal. Now that the ink is dry, what happens next? For Carter, for the Eagles books, and for a division rival watching their own defensive tackle situation spiral in real time. So here's where everything lands. Jalen Carter wakes up for training camp this week, not as a guy playing out a rookie deal anymore, but as a player locked into Philadelphia through the 2031 season, carrying the single richest guarantee any defensive tackle has ever seen. With the extension, he will now be under contract through the 2031 season. For the Eagles, this closes out arguably their single most important piece of offseason business. The agreement completes one of the Eagles' most important pieces of offseason business, while ensuring that one of the NFL's premier young defenders remains in Philadelphia for the long term. No more speculation. No more minicamp ambiguity about whether his absence was contract-related. No more wondering if this turns into a holdout story once pads come on. But locking down Carter and Davis together at a combined $230 million doesn't come without consequences elsewhere on the roster. CBS Sports flagged exactly where the next pressure point is coming, and it's not far off. It's an expensive investment at $230 million, but the Eagles are going to face a similar dilemma next year, having found 2-star secondary players in the 2024 NFL Draft, with cornerback Quinyon Mitchell at number 22 overall, and then the versatile Cooper DeJean at number 40 overall. Both will be extension eligible next offseason. Mitchell's case is going to be its own storyline, given the year he just had. Mitchell is coming off a campaign in which he was named first-team All-Pro and made the Pro Bowl after recording 45 tackles and 17 passes defensed, leading all defensive backs with a 39.6% completion percentage allowed and not surrendering a single touchdown in coverage. If Carter's deal is any indication of how Roseman handles homegrown stars, Mitchell and DeJean should expect their own paydays sooner rather than later. Then there's the ripple that's already playing out in real time down in Tampa. Villa's situation hasn't resolved. If anything, Carter's deal made it more complicated, not less. Multiple outlets reported that talks between Villa and the Buccaneers remain unsettled, even as he stayed on hand for camp. Villa is in the final year of his 4-year, $71 million contract and is set to make $17.7 million in 2026. Every week, that number sits there next to Carter's $38 million average. The pressure on Tampa's front office only builds. Villa, for his part, hasn't fully shut the door on staying either. Reports have described him as still hopeful an agreement can be reached, even after formally asking out, leaving the door open, right as the market around him has become more expensive than ever, thanks to what just happened in Philadelphia. And that's really the story underneath the story here. This was never just about one player's payday. It became the moment that reset how every defensive tackle in the league and every team with one on an expiring deal has to think about value at the position. Simmons, who held the record for barely a month before Carter passed him, now has to watch a third contract negotiation somewhere else in the league use his number as the floor instead of the ceiling. Via's camp is using Carter's deal as their new baseline in whatever conversations restart with Tampa, and any defensive tackle hitting free agency or extension eligibility over the next 2 off-seasons is walking into a room where the very first comparison anyone brings up is Jalen Carter's $152 million. For Carter himself, the number is only half the story now. The other half is the version his own coach described just days before the ink dried. The guy who needs to turn flash plays into weekly consistency, who needs to manage the edge that makes him special without letting it become a liability, all while coming off shoulder surgery on both sides, and stepping into 6 years as the highest paid anchor of an Eagles defensive line that just spent $250 million locking down its interior. The kid who fell to pick 9 because front offices were scared of what happened in Athens is now the same player. Every rival franchise is measuring their own guy against Slay's 3 words, the Eagles legend 6, McAfee's segment, Breer's historical footnote, Mansell's nod back to Georgia, Chea's warning shot toward Tampa. All of it pointed at the same conclusion. Jalen Carter didn't just get paid. He became the new number everyone else in his position has to explain themselves against. And as training camp rolls on, with Via's situation still unresolved, with Mitchell and DeJean's extensions looming next offseason, with Simmons watching his month-old record already look small, the number that dropped on a Tuesday morning in Philadelphia is still the one every front office in the league is quietly running back through their own math.